They want me to start with ancient wisdom or mysterious secrets, but I'll share something different. Yesterday, I saw a child attempt to catch water with his fists. The tighter he clenched, the less he held without realizing it. This child knew more about real power than most masters I've encountered. You see, I've spent years observing men shattering their hands against wooden boards, thinking that every broken piece demonstrates their strength. I did the same, shattered the boards one. The battles pursued faster kicks and tougher punches. The world witnessed perfection. I felt hollowness. Here's nobody warns you about mastery. The very instant you believe you've attained, it is the instant you have lost it. I found this to be true, not in a temple or training hall, but in my all-time moment of pride, when I believed I had nothing more to learn. Tell me about that day. But listen, first comprehend. This, what I'm going to share, isn't martial arts. It's about the lie we tell ourselves about power, about victory, about what it means to be strong. A lie, I think, lived until it almost ruined everything I'd created. I remember my first day at Master Armand's school, 16 years old, thinking I knew what strength was because I could win street fights in Hong Kong. I walked in ready to prove myself. Instead, I ended up flat on my back again once more. Not from force, but from something I couldn't even spot the other pupils. Hush, that I was talented, that I could learn sooner than everyone. What they could not see were the nights I punched water in a bucket until knuckles bled. Assuming pain was the route to strength, I trained till my body cursed. Considering exhaustion was somehow confirmation of progression. Everyone on my surroundings worshipped strength. They quantified it in crushed boards, in knockout wins, in the terror they could inspire in others. I became just what they desired, quicker, stronger, more devastating with each successive day in America. They labeled me the Oriental Warrior. A human weapon production houses sold me as unstoppable publications, wrote of my lightning punches. Students came in droves to learn my secrets. But here's what tormented me: the stronger I got, the more I felt like that bucket of water, held restricted, bounded by hard edges. Each new accomplishment became a prison. Every exhibition of talent added another chain. I was becoming a prisoner of my own fame, a captive of other expectations. I noticed the same eagerness in my students' eyes that I once felt, that same desperate urge to prove them, monsieur, themselves, to be strong, to be feared. They came seeking destruction, but what they required was dissolution. I know because I trod the same route, pursuing shadows of power, until I came across a truth that redefined everything. This was where I began. This was where my true journey started. Not in learning how to fight, but in unlearning all I thought I knew about power. And it began with a single question that I could not sleep about at night. What if everything that I had done was really holding me back from being what I could be? I was a collector of victories. Each was a brick in a wall. I was constructing a wall between me and failure, between me and failure. Every morning, I would wake up considering who I needed to impress that day. Every night, I would go to bed, figuring out how to be even better tomorrow. When you're hailed as the fastest fist in the East, you can't be second fastest when they call you the dragon. You can't let them see you're human. 100 demonstrations, 100 flawless performances, no room for error, no room for doubt. The pressure wasn't so much about winning anymore. It was about being superhuman. They placed me on magazine covers, referred to me As the ambassador of Kung Fu to the West, suddenly I wasn't merely fighting for myself. Every match became a referendum on Chinese martial arts. Every victory or defeat would either validate or dishonor centuries of tradition. The weight of an entire culture's expectations pressed down on my shoulders. My opponents weren't just fighters anymore. They were threats to everything. Supposed to represent, I created rules for myself. Never show fatigue, never admit pain, never reveal uncertainty. I trained myself to smile through exhaustion, to make impossible moves look effortless. The harder it became, the simpler. I had to make it appear. Wasn't simply practicing techniques. And longer, I was rehearsing perfection. And here's the real poison of it all. I began to believe my own performance, began to think that anything short of domination was shame, that openness was weakness, that questioning was failure. I had created myself a throne of expectations, but that throne was turning into my prison. The worst aspect, I was teaching this same prison to my students, instructing them to pursue the same ghost of perfection that was haunting me every time. They called me Sifu. Every time. They called me Sifu. Every time they looked at me with that desperate need to learn the secret of power, I felt the walls of this prison growing higher. It happened during a private challenge match in my Oakland school. My opponent was a master of Northern Shaolin, skilled, respected, dangerous, the kind of fight that usually fed my hunger. For validation, he came at me with everything he had. And I replied with technical perfection. Every move, just as it should be, every counter perfectly timed, a flawless victory. The crowd went wild, students cheered. Another flawless performance for the dragon. But as I stood there, observing my opponent bow in defeat, something snapped inside me. The victory tasted hollow, like biting into a lovely fruit. And tasting ash that night, I couldn't sleep. The perfection of my performance haunted me. I went to my training room, lit one candle, and started my routine meditation. But this time, something was different. In place of concentrating on my next achievement, my next display of power, I found myself observing the candle flame. The flame didn't attempt to demonstrate its heat. It didn't execute its light. It merely was. And in that instant, I saw myself not the Bruce Lee others desire to see but who I had become a man. Was so concerned with demonstrating his worthiness that he had overlooked the act of simply being worthy. I stood up and punched the same punch I had punched thousands of times before. But this time, I wasn't attempting to demonstrate its speed or force for the first time in years. Since I was a kid, I punched a punch merely to comprehend it. No performance, no show, just raw expression. The revelation struck me like a thunderbolt. I had perfected the act of fighting other people, but I was losing the battle with myself. Every victory had been another link in a chain of expectations. Every flawless performance had dug my prison deeper. I was stuck in a never-ending cycle of proving, performing, perfecting, never letting myself be in that moment alone in my training room. I finally realized, true mastery isn't about racking up victories. It's about freeing yourself from the need for them. The real fight wasn't in the ring. It never taught me. What 1,000 victories could not watch it flow. It doesn't try to overcome the rock yet. The grandest canyon bears witness to its power. It does attempt to prove its strength, yet given time, it reshapes mountains. It has no fixed form, yet this very formlessness makes it indestructible. I had spent years building myself into something unbreakable, but water never breaks because it never resists. It flows, adapts, transforms to put it in any shape, and it becomes that form, while still being entirely itself. This is not weakness. This is the ultimate demonstration of power. The truth hit me like lightning. I had been attempting to become powerful by becoming unchangeable, by constructing walls, by resisting, by proving all along. True power was in the opposite direction, in becoming completely changeable, completely responsive, completely free of the need to prove anything. Consider this paradox. The moment you attempt to be powerful, you become weak because your every attempt to be powerful originates in a place of weakness. It originates in a need, but when you move beyond this need, when you release the very notion of being powerful, that is when you touch real power. This is why a master's movements appear effortless, not because they've practiced until they're perfect, but because they've released the need for perfection. They've moved beyond the ego that requires validation. Their power stems not from resistance, but from total acceptance, not of rigidity, but of absolute adaptability. I knew that all my life I had been a fist clenched tight, ready to hit, but a fist can only be a fist. It has one use, one shape, one meaning. When you're a fist, everything appears like a battle open, that fist, however, and all at once your hand can be anything. It can hold, create, communicate, connect. This is the crux of what I found. True power is not in what you can dictate, but in what you can become. Understanding was not enough. I needed to change everything, my training, my teaching, my whole style martial arts. This was not about inventing a new style. It was about moving beyond the very concept of style itself. This was the birth of Jeet Kune, do the way of the intercepting fist. But it's not what everyone thinks it is. I eliminated every technique that was present just for tradition's sake. I questioned every move that served form over function, the classical mess, as I'd called it. Had to end. No more gracious forms executed in thin air. No more techniques kept only because they were old. Truth doesn't care for age. I started learning everything: Western boxing, fencing, wrestling. I borrowed what was valuable and left what wasn't. My fellow traditionalists were appalled. You can't blend martial arts, they said. You're reducing centuries of tradition. But I wasn't looking at preserving tradition. I was interested in freeing the human body and mind from the shackles of style in my Quan. We ceased to practice fixed patterns. Instead, we learned to read energy, feel intention to respond without thinking. No more stiff stances, no more memorized combinations. I taught my students to be like water, to allow their movements to arise from the situation itself, not from some predetermined form. The ultimate goal wasn't to master 1,000 techniques, but to move beyond technique completely to a point where your body reacts without the hindrance of thought, without the lag of decision. Not by strict discipline, but by absolute freedom, not by building up techniques, but by removing the unnecessary. This was the most difficult lesson for my students to understand. The greatest form of martial arts isn't about adding more to your arsenal. It's about stripping away everything that isn't necessary, about taking away every obstacle between intention and action, about becoming so empty that you can contain everything, so formless that you can adapt to anything. What I learned it in combat, in training, in those quiet moments of revelation. It was never just about fighting. Life itself is our greatest opponent, and most of us approach it like novice fighters, rigid, resistant, always trying to force our way through. I see it in the businessman who can't adapt when his perfect plan falls apart, in the artist who becomes trapped by her own success, in the parent who exhausts themselves attempting to hold up an image of perfection. Your own life, where are you grasping when you ought to be flowing? Where are you resisting rather than responding each time that you need to prove yourself question? What are you battling truly against? I face this in my own family. Life, Hollywood needed the invincible Bruce Lee, but my son Brandon required a dad who could play, who could laugh, who could reveal vulnerability. My wife Linda required a partner, not a legend. I learned to navigate between these worlds like water, changing its shape, not through exertion, but through spontaneous response to what each instant required. When I appear on the movie set now, I no longer wear the burden of being Bruce Lee when I step into my quan to teach. I'm not attempting to maintain an image when I meet a challenge. I don't respond with resistance, but with readiness to become whatever the moment demands. This is true. Power, but the power to be free of the necessity to impose anything, not the strength to defeat resistance, but the wisdom to move through love life without creating resistance first. Remember the child I was talking about trying to hold water in his fists. We are all that child. The more we try to cling, power to success, to perfection, the more it melts from between our fingers. My biggest victory wasn't learning how to hold tightly. It was learning to open my hands fully, you see. We all start as water fluid, changeable, pure potential. Then life teaches us to become ice, solid, unchangeable, seeming strong. We believe this hardness is power. We believe this rigidity is strength. But ice can only be ice. Water can be anything. I wasted years of my life constructing walls of accomplishment, only to find that genuine accomplishment is found in having no W's at all. I trained to be supernatural, only to learn that the greatest art is becoming fully natural. I wanted to be exceptional, only to learn that the real power is in being just what every moment calls for, nothing more, nothing less. This is my message to you. Don't seek to be powerful, seek to be free. Don't try to be exceptional, try to be honest. Don't work to overcome life, learn to flow with it. Your greatest opponent isn't failure or weakness or inability. Your greatest opponent is your own need to prove that you have no failures, no weaknesses, not just philosophy. This isn't just philosophy. This isn't just martial arts. This is the core. Truth. I learned that true mastery is not about rising above others, it's about rising above yourself. Not by force, but by freedom. Not by resistance, but by release. Look inside yourself. Where are you? The same with you. Remember, be water, my friend. Not because water is strong, although it is not because water is unstoppable as it can be. Be water, since water never attempts to be something else than what it is. And in that plain truth is the force that can move mountains.